The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast space. Ambassador Thylan stumbled inside, her forearms shaking as she tried to keep herself upright. Her blue skin, normally bright like ocean water, had turned pale and gray. Dark circles surrounded her large eyes, and her breath came in short gasps. Behind her, 2 Cathara guards helped support her weak body. They had traveled for days without rest to reach this place. Their homeworld was dying, and this was their last hope. The chamber was huge, with seats arranged in circles that rose up like a mountain. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat watching. Some had scales, others had fur. Some breathed air, others needed special masks. But they all had one thing in common: they were safe. Their worlds were not burning. At the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed the horror happening at Cathara Prime. Massive black ships filled the sky above crystal cities. Red beams of energy rained down from space, turning buildings to dust. Bodies lay in the streets. Children cried for parents who would never answer. Thylan fell to her knees in front of the display. Her voice was so quiet that the chamber's speakers had to make it louder for everyone to hear. "Please," she whispered. "My people have less than 2 days. The Vorthok ships are preparing for the final attack. 3 billion souls will die if no one helps us." The chamber fell silent. Even the air recyclers seemed to stop humming. Everyone stared at the images of destruction. Chancellor Vex of the Altarian Republic stood up first. He was tall and thin, with silver skin that gleamed under the lights. His voice was cold and formal. "The Vorthok Empire now controls 17 star systems," he said. "They have the largest military force in this sector. We cannot risk a war that would destroy millions more lives." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Other delegates nodded their heads. Prime Counselor Thane of the Hegemony rose next. His massive form cast a shadow over several rows of seats. "Our military analysts have run the numbers," he announced. "Any rescue mission has only a tiny chance of success. We would be sending our people to die for nothing." One by one, the great powers of the galaxy gave their answers. The Trade Federation talked about economic stability. The Stellar Alliance mentioned strategic concerns. The Defense Pact spoke of military readiness. Each speech was the same. They were sorry. They felt bad for the Cathara people, but they could not help. Ambassador Thylan's shoulders shook as she listened. With each refusal, her hope died a little more. Her people had been good neighbors. They had shared their crystal technology and their beautiful songs. They had never hurt anyone. But when death came for them, no one would stand with them. "The Hegemony will provide humanitarian aid after the crisis," Thane continued. "We can help resettle any survivors who escape." "How generous," Thylan said, her voice bitter. "You will help bury our bodies." The debate continued for hours. Some delegates suggested sending medical supplies. Others offered to take refugees, but only a few thousand, not the billions who needed saving. It was like offering a cup of water to put out a burning building in the back corner of the chamber, far from the important seats. Commander Jiwon Kim sat quietly. She wore the simple gray uniform of the Terran Federation. No gold decorations. No fancy medals. Just plain cloth with a small Earth flag on the shoulder. She was young for a commander, maybe 30 years old. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight knot. Her dark eyes never looked away from the holographic images of dying Cathara children. While other delegates checked their data pads or whispered to their aides, she watched every second of the horror. The human delegation was tiny compared to the others. Earth was still new to galactic politics. They had only 3 ships in this entire sector of space. Most delegates forgot humans were even in the chamber. As the session dragged on, the mood grew heavy with defeat. The Cathara would die, and everyone knew it. Some delegates were already standing up to leave. The matter was settled. 3 billion lives were not worth the risk. This session is concluded, announced the council speaker. May the Cathara find peace in whatever comes. Thailand remained on her knees as beings filed past her. Some looked sad, others seemed relieved that the difficult decision was over. A few dropped data chips with offers of refugee assistance. Too little, too late. The chamber emptied slowly. Soon, only a handful of people remained. Thailand's guards helped her stand, but her legs could barely hold her weight. She had failed. Her entire species would die because she could not convince anyone to care. A shadow fell across her. She looked up to see the young human commander standing nearby. The woman's face was calm, but her eyes burned with something Thailand had not seen all day. Anger. Pack light, Ji-won said in her quiet voice. We leave in 6 hours. Thailand stared at her. You, ... Your ships are too small. Your fleet cannot, ... Pack light, Ji-won repeated. She turned and walked toward the exit, her boots clicking on the polished floor. At the doorway, she stopped and looked back. Bring everyone you can carry. We are coming for your people. The chamber fell silent again, but this time, it was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence before a storm. Admiral Do-yoon Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display that showed his death sentence. 3 massive Vorthok battle groups spread across space like dark storm clouds. Each enemy ship was twice the size of his largest vessel. Each battle group had more firepower than his entire fleet combined. Sir, called Lieutenant Min-ji Lee from her station. The Galactic Observer Corps is requesting permission to record our engagement. She paused, then added quietly, they want to document our final battle for the history books. Do-yoon almost smiled. The galaxy expected to watch humanity commit glorious suicide. They thought humans would charge bravely into certain death, make a heroic last stand, and die with honor. They were wrong on every count, except the last one. All ships. This is Admiral Park, he broadcast on the fleet channel. You all know why we are here. Those crystal cities down there are full of families just like ours. The galaxy says we cannot save them. They are probably right. He looked around his bridge. Every face was young, serious, determined. These people had volunteered for this mission knowing they would probably die. But here is what the galaxy does not understand about humans, Do-yoon continued. We do not fight to win pretty battles. We fight to get our people home. Today, the Cathara are our people too. All ships, execute attack pattern Foxtrot. Remember, there are no rules in a knife fight. The human fleet scattered like birds fleeing a hawk. But instead of running away, they turned and dove at the enemy, from every direction at once. The Vorthok commanders had studied human tactics for weeks. They knew how humans were supposed to fight. They were completely unprepared for what actually happened. The destroyer, relentless, accelerated to ramming speed and plowed straight into the engine section of a Vorthok heavy cruiser. Both ships vanished in a ball of nuclear fire that lit up the darkness of space. The explosion was so bright that sensors on both sides went blind for several seconds. Captain Sun Ho Choi led his fighter squadron in a direct assault on the bridge of the enemy flagship. His 12 small ships dove through a wall of defensive fire that should have destroyed them instantly. 7 fighters died in the first 10 seconds. The remaining 5 smashed into the command tower like bullets through glass. The Vorthok fleet commander watched his bridge crew die around him as human fighters exploded against his armor. His ship was still operational, but his tactical center was gone. Commands became confused. Orders were delayed. The perfect Vorthok formation began to crack. On the cruiser Defiant, Captain Sung-jae Keo saw 3 enemy destroyers moving to surround his ship. Standard tactics called for a fighting retreat. Instead, he ordered full power to engines and charged straight at the center ship. His crew thought he had lost his mind. They followed his orders anyway. The Vorthok captain saw the human ship coming and tried to turn away. But KO had calculated the intercept perfectly. Defiant struck the destroyer at its weakest point, where the hull connected to the engine pods. Both ships spun away, trailing fire and debris. "Sir," called KO's weapons officer, "we have lost main power, and life support is failing." "Then we better make this count," KO replied. He activated the ship's self-destruct sequence. 20 seconds later, Defiant exploded with enough force to damage to more Vorthok ships nearby. The Vorthok had trained for centuries to fight disciplined battles between organized fleets. They knew how to counter every standard tactic in the Galactic Military Handbook. But humans were not fighting by any handbook. They rammed when they should retreat. They charged when they should flee. They sacrificed valuable ships to destroy less important targets. Fighter pilot Lieutenant Yuna Han found herself alone after her squadron was wiped out. Her small ship was damaged, and her weapons were nearly empty. Any sane pilot would have retreated to the carrier. Instead, she spotted a Vorthok troop transport heading for the planet's surface. The transport was huge and heavily armed. Her fighter was like a mosquito attacking a tiger. She did not care. Somewhere on that transport were soldiers planning to kill Cathara children. Han dove at the transport's engine intake, firing her last missiles as defensive turrets filled the space around her with deadly energy beams. Her fighter took hit after hit, systems failing one by one. She held course until the very end. The transport's engine sucked her burning fighter inside like a hungry mouth. The explosion tore the massive ship apart from within. 3,000 Vorthok soldiers died with her, soldiers who would never reach the surface. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships threw themselves at the enemy with a fury that shocked both sides. The Vorthok had expected easy victory against a small human fleet. Instead, they found themselves fighting an opponent that treated every tactical rule as a suggestion. The battle raged for 6 hours. When the guns finally stopped firing, half the human fleet was gone, but the Vorthok formation was shattered. Their perfect attack had become a chaotic brawl. Most importantly, the orbital bombardment had stopped. On the surface of Cathara Prime, the first human transport ships began landing in the Crystal Cities. The rescue operation had begun in his command center. The Vorthok fleet commander stared at his tactical display in confusion. His forces still outnumbered the humans. He should have won this battle easily. Instead, he found himself fighting an enemy that made no sense. The humans had not won, but they had done something far more important. They had bought time. Major Haiwan Zhang's boots hit the crystal ground of Cathara Prime as plasma bolts screamed through the air above her head. The beautiful spires of the capital city were cracking under the orbital bombardment. Pieces of crystal fell like deadly rain, shattering on the streets below. "Move, move, move," she shouted to her Marines as they poured out of the landing craft. "Set up defensive positions around the civilian shelters. Remember what we trained for. Every life matters." The Cathara civilians huddled in underground bunkers, carved from solid crystal. Their large eyes were filled with terror as human soldiers in battle armor ran past them. Many had never seen humans before. They looked so small compared to other galactic species, but they moved with purpose and determination. Sergeant Ji-hoon Nam kicked down the door of a damaged shelter where 50 Cathara families were trapped. The ceiling had partially collapsed, and dust filled the air. Children cried while their parents tried to comfort them. "We are here to help," Ji-hoon said in broken Cathara language. "Follow us. Stay low." An elderly Cathara male grabbed his arm with 2 of his 4 hands. "The monsters are coming," he whispered. "They kill everyone, even the children." "Not today," Ji-hoon replied. He helped the old man to his feet. "Today, you go home with us." Outside, the Vorthok ground forces were landing. Their ships descended like black insects, carrying thousands of soldiers in powered armor. Each Vorthok warrior stood 8 feet tall and carried weapons that could cut through steel. They had conquered dozens of worlds using the same tactics. Land, kill everyone, move to the next target. But they had never fought humans before. Corporal Minji Park set up her heavy machine gun at the end of Crystal Avenue, the main street leading to the evacuation zone. Her position gave her a clear view of the Vorthok landing area. When the first wave of enemy soldiers came marching down the avenue, she was ready. The Vorthok moved in perfect formation, their armor gleaming in the light of the burning city. They expected to find terrified civilians, and maybe a few local police. Instead, they walked into a killing zone. Minji opened fire with her machine gun, sending a stream of bullets into the lead soldiers. The heavy rounds cracked their armor and sent them stumbling. Other Marines joined in from buildings on both sides of the street. Grenades exploded among the Vorthok ranks. The enemy soldiers were tough and well-trained, but they had not expected such fierce resistance. They took cover behind overturned vehicles and crystal formations, returning fire with their plasma weapons. The battle for Crystal Avenue had begun. Behind the fighting, human transport ships continued landing. Each ship could carry 200 Cathara civilians to safety. But loading them took time, and time was something the Marines did not have much of. Private Sun Ho Kim found himself protecting a medical center where injured Cathara lay on crystal tables. The building's walls were transparent, offering no protection from enemy fire. When a squad of Vorthok soldiers approached, he had only his rifle and a handful of grenades. "Come on," he muttered to himself. "Just a few more minutes." The soldiers kicked down the front entrance and charged inside. Sun Ho met them in the hallway, firing as fast as he could pull the trigger. His first shots brought down the lead warrior, but there were 5 more behind him. A plasma bolt burned through his left shoulder, spinning him around. Another hit his leg, dropping him to one knee. But he kept firing until his rifle was empty. Then he pulled the pin on his last grenade. "For the kids," he whispered, and threw himself at the enemy soldiers. The explosion brought down part of the ceiling, but it also stopped the Vorthok advance. In the medical ward, behind him, 30 injured Cathara civilians lived to see another day. All across the city, similar battles raged. Human Marines held impossible positions against overwhelming odds. They fought from rooftops and basements, from crashed ships and ruined buildings. Each position they held meant more transports could land. More civilians could be saved. Lieutenant Yun Han's squad had been defending the central plaza for 4 hours when they ran out of ammunition. The Vorthok had surrounded their position, and there was no way out. 20,000 Cathara families were waiting for evacuation just 2 blocks away. "Sir," called her radio operator. "Command says the next transport wave is 10 minutes out. If we can hold for 10 more minutes, ... Yuna looked at her soldiers. They were tired, wounded, and down to their last few bullets. But their eyes still burned with determination. She made her decision. "Fix bayonets," she ordered. "We hold this ground." The Vorthok rushed their position in a final assault. The Marines met them with steel blades and desperate courage, hand to hand, human against alien, fighting for every inch of crystal pavement. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found the plaza littered with bodies from both sides. Lieutenant Han and her squad were gone, but the evacuation zone was secure. The transports had landed safely by the end of the day. Over 2 million Cathara civilians had been loaded onto human ships and sent to safety. The cost had been terrible. Entire Marine units wiped out. Transport crews lost. Heroes dying in every street. But as the last evacuation ship lifted off from the Crystal City, every human soldier knew they had done something important. They had kept their promise. No one was left behind. In orbit, the Vorthok commander watched the evacuation ships escape and tried to understand what he had witnessed. His forces still controlled the planet. He had won the battle. But somehow, it felt like defeat. The humans had saved people he thought were already dead. Admiral Doyon Park watched the tactical display on his bridge as the last civilian transport cleared Cathara Prime's atmosphere. 2.5 million Cathara souls were now safely aboard the evacuation fleet, their crystal ships glowing like jewels against the darkness of space. "Sir," called Communications Officer Yoon Ji-yoon, her voice tight with worry. "Massive hyperspace signatures detected. Something big is coming." The space around them suddenly filled with light as dozens of Vorthok warships dropped out of hyperspace. The reinforcement fleet was 3 times larger than the original force. Massive battleships and heavy cruisers formed a perfect blockade around the planet. Doyon felt his stomach drop. The trap had been sprung with perfect timing. The Vorthok had waited until the humans committed everything to the rescue operation, then closed the door behind them. "Fleet status report," he ordered. 18 combat vessels remaining, replied his tactical officer. "Most are damaged from the earlier fighting. The evacuation fleet has 47 transports, but they are not armed." The numbers were clear and brutal. The Vorthok now had over 100 warships surrounding them. Even if the human fleet fought perfectly, they could not break through such overwhelming force. Lieutenant Minji Lee looked up from her station. "Sir, we could punch through their blockade with our fastest ships. The assault cruisers might make it to hyperspace if we coordinate the attack properly." Doyon understood what she was saying. They could save the human fleet by abandoning the Cathara civilians. It was the logical choice. It was what any military academy would teach. Save your own forces and retreat to fight another day. He looked at the display showing the fragile transport ships filled with refugee families, children who had watched their world burn, parents who had lost everything except hope. "Signal all evacuation vessels," Doyon ordered. "Form up on our battle line. We fight our way out together." The bridge crew stared at him in shock. Fighting alongside civilian transports was military suicide. The fragile ships would slow them down and make them easy targets. "Sir," his executive officer said quietly, "we cannot protect them and fight effectively at the same time. We have to choose." "We already chose," Doyon replied. "We came here to save these people. We do not abandon them now." Across the communication channel, Ambassador Thylan's voice crackled from the lead transport ship. "Admiral Park, you have done more than enough for my people. Save your fleet. Save your soldiers. We understand." Ambassador Doyon said firmly. "We came here together, and we leave together. That is what humans do." There was a long pause before Thylan spoke again. Her voice was strong and clear. "Then my people have decided. If you fight, we fight beside you." The Cathara transports, never designed for combat, began moving into formation alongside the human warships. Their crystal hulls gleamed in the light of distant stars. They had no weapons, no armor, no military training, but they refused to hide behind their rescuers. The Vorthok fleet commander watched this strange formation with confusion. The humans were arranging their forces to protect worthless civilian ships. The crystal vessels could not fight and would only make escape more difficult. It made no tactical sense. He decided to end this quickly. "All ships, open fire. Destroy the transports first." The space battle began with a wall of plasma fire from the Vorthok fleet. The human ships threw themselves into the path of the incoming shots, using their own hulls as shields to protect the evacuation vessels. Captain Sung Jae-ko's cruiser Defiant took direct hits from 3 enemy battleships at once. His ship's armor melted away under the concentrated fire, but he held position at the front of the formation. Behind him, a Cathara transport filled with 10,000 civilians continued toward the hyperspace jump point. "Hull breaches on all decks," reported his damage control officer. "Life support is failing. All power to engines," KO ordered. "We hold the line." Defiant absorbed hit after hit, her hull cracking open like an egg. But she stayed in position until the transport behind her reached safety. Only then did Ko order his crew to the escape pods. The cruiser died in a brilliant explosion, taking 2 Vorthok destroyers with her. Colonel Unahan commanded the Marine assault ship Hammer when she saw 3 enemy cruisers moving to surround the evacuation fleet's flank. She made her choice. Hammer broke formation and charged straight at the Vorthok ships. "All Marines, prepare for ramming speed," she announced over the intercom. "Today, we show the galaxy what human courage looks like." Hammer struck the lead Vorthok cruiser at full acceleration. The impact tore both ships apart, but it created a gap in the enemy line. 3 more transports slipped through to safety. The battle raged for 14 hours. Human ships died one by one, each sacrifice buying time for more civilians to escape. The Vorthok had superior numbers and firepower, but they could not understand the tactical insanity they were witnessing. Why would professional soldiers die for aliens they barely knew? Why protect ships that could not fight back? Why choose certain death over logical retreat? As dawn broke over Cathera Prime, the last Cathera transport jumped to hyperspace. Every single civilian ship had escaped. The human fleet was gone, scattered wreckage drifting in the darkness. But the mission was complete. 2.5 million souls lived because humans had refused to abandon them. In the silence after the battle, the Vorthok commander stared at the empty space where his enemies had died. He had won a perfect tactical victory, so why did it feel like the humans had beaten him? The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with angry voices as delegates argued about what to do with humanity. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Cathera Prime, and the major powers wanted answers. Chancellor Vex of the Altarian Republic stood at his podium, his silver skin gleaming under the chamber lights. "The Terran Federation has shown complete disregard for galactic stability," he declared. "Their reckless attack on Vorthok forces has put us all at risk." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. The powerful civilizations that had refused to help the Cathara were now angry that humans had tried. 47 human ships were destroyed, added Prime Counselor Thane of the Hegemony. For what? To save 1 minor species. The strategic cost was completely unreasonable. Trade Minister Korax clicked his mandibles together nervously. "The Vorthok Empire is furious. They are threatening to cut all diplomatic ties with species that support human actions. Our trade routes could be severely damaged." The debate continued. 4 hours. Delegate after delegate spoke about the dangers of human interference. They talked about economic consequences and military threats. They demanded that Earth be sanctioned for disturbing galactic peace. In the back corner of the chamber, the small human delegation sat quietly. Commander Juan Kim, now promoted to Admiral after the battle, listened to every word. Her uniform was still simple gray, but it now carried medals for valor that few beings in the galaxy had ever earned. Finally, the council speaker called for the Cathara response. "Ambassador Thylin, your people were the cause of this incident. What is your position on human actions?" Ambassador Thylin rose from her seat, her blue skin now bright and healthy after months of recovery in human space. She walked slowly to the central podium, her forearms steady and strong. The chamber fell silent as she began to speak. "Honored delegates," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "You speak of strategic value and economic consequences. You calculate the cost of saving my people in credits and ship losses. But you have failed to understand the most important lesson of what happened at Cathara Prime." The holographic displays around the chamber came to life, showing images from the evacuation, human Marines carrying Cathara children to safety, Admiral Park's fleet forming a protective wall around refugee ships, the crystal spires of New Cathara rising on a human colony world where her people now lived in peace. "The humans did not save us because we were valuable allies," Thylin continued. "They did not calculate our worth in trade agreements or military partnerships. They saved us for one simple reason, because we asked for help, and humans do not abandon those who trust them." Chancellor Vex interrupted angrily. This emotional appeal ignores the reality of galactic politics. Resources are limited. Military forces cannot be wasted on impossible missions. Impossible. Thylan's voice grew stronger. 3 billion of my people are alive today because humans decided that word has no meaning. When you called our rescue impossible, they called it Tuesday. She touched a control on the podium, and the display showed footage from the battle. Human ships ramming into Vorthok vessels. Marines fixing bayonets for final charges. Transport. Pilots flying through walls of enemy fire to save civilians they had never met. Look at these images and tell me what you see, Thylan said. You see tactical mistakes, poor resource management, strategic failures. But my children see something else entirely. They see beings who kept their promise when the entire galaxy turned away. The chamber was completely quiet now. Even the usual background noise of translators and data systems had stopped. In the 3 months since our rescue, something interesting has happened, Thylan continued. Other species have been watching. The Zalani Collective, enslaved by the hegemony for 2 centuries, sent a message to Earth last week. It contained only 3 words: "We stand ready." Nervous whispers began spreading through the chamber. Several delegates looked uncomfortable. The mining colonies of the Rigel system declared independence yesterday, Thylan went on. Their broadcast said we refuse to stand alone. The agricultural worlds of Sector 7 have stopped sending tribute to their Altarian overlords. Even now, as we debate sanctions against humanity, rebellion spreads across a dozen systems. Chancellor Vex stood up angrily. These actions threaten the stability that has maintained galactic peace for centuries. Peace. Thylan's voice turned sharp. You mean the peace where powerful species consume weaker ones without consequence? Where entire civilizations disappear and no one asks questions? That is not peace. That is fear. She gestured toward the human delegation. These beings have shown the galaxy something we had forgotten. That someone, somewhere, will answer when the helpless call for aid. That no species has to face extinction alone. That promise is worth more than all your trade agreements and military alliances. The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. If oppressed species believed humans would help them, the current power structure could collapse. Rebellions would spread. The comfortable order that kept the strong in control would crumble. The galaxy refused to save my people, Thylan said as she prepared to leave the podium. But humanity's answer, that no ally fights alone, has become a light in the darkness for every species that suffers under tyranny. She looked directly at the major power delegates. You wanted to know why humans fight. They fight because someone has to. And now, thanks to their example, they will not be fighting alone much longer. As she returned to her seat, delegates throughout the chamber began receiving urgent messages from their home governments. Reports of unrest, independence movements, and revolution were flooding in from across the galaxy. The human doctrine had become more than military strategy. It had become hope itself.